All right, I guess we could get started. Good, I don't know, perfect weather day on the middle of November to everyone. Welcome to today's very exciting Future of New York discussion on the great borough of Queens, my home borough. My name is Travis Terry. I'm the president of Capalino. The privilege of moderating today's discussion with two very special people and two dear friends, Queens' very impressive and dedicated borough president, Donovan Richards, and Queens Chamber of Commerce president, Tom Grech. And yes, for this occasion, I did wear my Mets jersey because I'm branded for Queens. So, and just couldn't be more excited about Edwin Diaz signing to a 5-year deal. I'm in the wrong business. Over the course of the next hour, the borough president, Tom, and I will try to cover as much as we can about what's going on in Queens and what we can look forward to. Of course, there's a lot going on. I have no doubt in my mind that after listening to these two wonderful gentlemen, you're going to walk away saying, I got to move my family to Queens. I got to work in Queens. I got to open a business in Queens, or visit its incredible array of offerings from great food, arts and culture, history, parks, including, I'll just add, the very exciting Queensway that's hopefully coming soon. Thank you, everyone, and ethnic diversity. And even though we won't spend too much time on sports today, although as an admitted complete sports nut, I'd love to, it's important to point out that this is the only borough that hosts a Grand Slam tennis event about a quarter of a mile away from the best baseball team, which, as noted before, thankfully we signed our closer. Of course, there is no greater or more important sporting event in the borough of Queens than this Wednesday showdown, the city's Catholic high school JV girls soccer championship between two major Queens schools, my daughter's St. Francis Prep and Archbishop Malloy, being of course played in Brooklyn, which makes no sense, but that's what it is. So go Terriers. So I'll admit I was born in Manhattan, but I'm a converted Queensian. I absolutely love raising my kids here. The people, the energy, the brilliance, and its family friendliness make it, perfect place. Really is. Love taking my kids to the park, hearing the dozens of languages being spoken everywhere you go, and being in Flushing Meadow, Corona Park on weekends reminds me that the heartbeat of America is smack in the middle of our great borough. All right, so on to our panel. A couple quick intros. Borough President Richards was born in beautiful southeastern Queens and lives with his beautiful family in Rockdale. His leadership on everything from immigration, COVID recovery, economic development, healthcare, transportation, climate resiliency, and civil rights is nothing but exceptional. It is an honor to have him representing me and many of us. I also just want to point out that maybe what you don't know as much about Donovan is the little things that he does just to make our lives better, whether it's a stop sign or helping a park or improving a school, providing a technology lab. Those are the little things that really improve our quality of life and are why we're lucky to have such a special elected official. Outside of Donovan, Tom is probably Queens' biggest cheerleader I've ever met. I'm actually convinced at this point that Tom might be cloned because he's literally at every single event I've been to, whether it's in arts, sports, business, social services, etc. Constantly articulating this love for Queens that is just exceptional. And Tom, thank you. At the Queens Chamber of Commerce, Tom and the Chamber have been passionately advocating for a growing tech sector, advocating for important infrastructure for the borough, quality of life improvements, and have helped thousands of businesses in our borough thrive. Finally, as noted before, I'm wearing a Mets jersey, and because Borough President Tom are Mets fans, that's why they're allowed to be on here. At some point, we may do one on the Bronx. Don't expect me to be wearing a Yankees jersey. It's just not in my blood. So before I start asking our guests some questions, just some quick housekeeping. First, this is the Future of New York by Capalino is a series of about up to 14, 15 segments with leaders across the region. We've covered urban planning, tourism, green buildings, so many topics, and you can see all those webinars on the Capalino website, along with why Capalino, to me, is just the best team of people I've ever had a chance to work with. So many passionate people about our city. This webinar will also be posted after its conclusion on our website, because I know that there's a lot of people that can make it today and want to watch it. Second point I just want to make is the three of us will be chatting for about the first 45 minutes, and then we will turn it over to audience questions. If you have a question that you would like to ask panelists, please place in the chat and we'll get to that. All right. So, Mr. Borough President Tom, you guys are the best. Thank you for taking the time today. I know our audience has a lot to learn and eager to learn about what's going on in the borough. Let me just start off by asking this question because I hear how passionate the two of you are. Why do you love the borough? What makes it so special for you? Borough President, maybe we'll just start with you.
Woo. I mean, that's an easy question. You got the jersey on. But truly, what I've come to really appreciate, and I've always loved. I'm born and bred in Queens. Sorry to hear you were born in Manhattan, but you know that happens a lot. You know, people who live in Manhattan or grew up in Manhattan, they come to Queens, and they get a taste of some of that diverse cuisine, and then they end up moving here. But truly, what I would say that makes Queens extremely, extremely special is the diversity. And I've come to really, before I was borough president, as many of you know, we sort of live in these little silos. We live in our little corners of the world and we don't branch out, although, you know, we live in this massive borough. But I could tell you in my first, I think it's like 20 months as borough president, just getting around and really getting to celebrate culture, going to our cultural institutions, the food from Corona to Jackson Heights to, I mean, I was down in Jackson Heights yesterday. I got to stop in Diversity Plaza and get some good curry goat. I mean, you can't find this stuff everywhere. So you really can get a taste of the world here in the world's borough, as we call it. And then, you know, the evolving tech sector, and I know we're going to get into a lot of that, but what I would really say I've enjoyed personally in representing this borough is the diversity. 190 countries, 350 languages and dialects. I mean, you can go everywhere from synagogues to mosques to Sikh temples to churches to Catholic church. I mean, just that diversity is what I think really we need to continue to brand and let the world know about. But I think a lot of people are discovering that, and it's one of the reasons people want to be in Queens.
Thank you. Tom?
Thanks for the opportunity. And I echo what the borough president said. I would argue that one of the reasons why we're doing so well is the steady hand of leadership over the last 20 months or so of borough president Donovan Richards. So my hat is off to him. And I think the diversity is a very, very key part. But two of the things that we're working on that I think make Queens special and will make it even more special are both tech and the greening of our county in general, with different things regarding sustainability and removing carbon from the footprint in general. But I do think diversity is the coolest thing. I always love going to a Met game and seeing somebody that's wearing some of their traditional family garb from wherever they're from, and they got a little kid in tow, you know, maybe the same age or a little younger than Donovan's boy, D3, but it's like mom, and the kid's wearing a Met hat, right? Meanwhile, the mom and dad, you know, they speak English, but it's their second language, clearly, right? But that's the assimilation. That's the e pluribus unum that I love about Queens, especially.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So let's turn our discussion to business a little bit. I know that there's a number of business owners, people interested in possibly, you know, either relocating or expanding into Queens. Talk a little bit about why a company should locate in this borough.
Well,
So,
Queens.
Donovan, you go first.
Okay, Queens is the
Please.
future. I mean, we have growing communities like never before. You think about what's happening in Astoria, to Far Rockaway, to Jamaica. There's something really special. You know, you talked about the Queens Way. We talk about the Queens Link. Of course, I have to still talk about that. You look at the investments in our airports, our resiliency, the housing, our economy, and growing workforce, right? Life sciences, how we've been able to keep JetBlue here. But those investments central to the airport, I mean, $15 billion worth of investments going into the airport. We just announced Terminal 1, for instance. Terminal 5 will have some announcements with the governor in a few weeks on. So you look at the scale of how the economy is growing, how people want to be, and it's one of the reasons I've been bullish on ensuring, even through the land use process, that yes, we are growing housing here, right? We do have an affordable housing crisis across the city, but people want to be here, and that without enough supply, of course, with a high amount of demand and not enough supply, you're going to have challenges around continuing to grow the borough and businesses. And we really leverage these land use opportunities to grow small businesses across the borough as well. And to, I point to Innovation Queens quick because I know that's been the hottest topic. But even the way we're leveraging, the land use opportunities to say, hey, we want to see some commercial development. Perhaps we could have discounted rents for small businesses as well. So really, I think the borough has a lot to offer. The diversity I talked about is key to that strategy as well, continuing to promote that. But I think from sitting where I sit every day, the investments coming into the borough in every facet is one of the reasons I think people need to get in now before it's too late.
Yeah, Donovan, I would just add, I remember when you were chair of the Zoning and Franchises Committee, your focus on MWBEs, so important. And I used to always tell clients, because when they came in for a meeting with you, I was like, before you even sit down, Donovan's going to ask you, what is your MWBE strategy? And it was great because it was important, and it's important to getting all that right.
Right. And, you look at it from an equity standpoint, too, as we talk about growing jobs. How do we ensure we're supporting residents in public housing or people who live in public housing who also have local businesses as well, right? This is gentleman who's a part of the innovation plan, right? Where, this is a guy who has a cleaning company and he's from Queensbridge. He's able to hire people, right? So even as we get into these convoluted conversations around crime and safety, you got to grow jobs. That's the number one deterrent to crime, right? So how are we using these MWBEs who really are reflective of the borough and of the borough's diversity to grow small business as well, to be helpful? So I'm really appreciative to you. And I could tell you coach your clients when they come in because the answers are ready. Yes. And I think we're doing really well in that area.
Absolutely. Tom, I love your take on bringing in a business into Queens and being successful.
Thank you. And folks that know me and folks that know the chamber know they've heard this before, that the saddest professional day of my life was when Amazon pulled out what I call, sadly, the Valentine's Day massacre. And at the end of the day, after they first chose us and we sat down and started talking about why they chose us, kind of like, guys, really, ladies, why did you choose Queens? And it was three very, very simple things that we want to leverage and we want to work towards with the borough president and others. And those three things are, number one, our diversity, which has been talked about a lot, but it's really true. It's not just conversation. Number two was our transportation network, trains, planes, and automobiles, right? Borough President Richards mentioned the investment in the infrastructure. I'd also argue whether it's going to be a rail link from LaGuardia or other transportation modes, we have arrived. Queens used to be that place that folks traveled through. Now it's a place they travel to, and they move all around when they're in Queens. And then last but not least, which I think is one of the most important ones, we have 7 different colleges and universities in our borough, over 100,000 students, 48% are foreign born. I don't want those kids, and I know I speak for others when I say this, I don't want those kids when they graduate to go to Austin or California or down south. We've got to build an environment right here in Queens County that can get them to stay. The borough president is working on a Queens Tech Fair, among other things. We started the Queens Tech Council, which of course, Travis, you're part of, the borough president's part of, and we're going to be announcing next week and do a ribbon cutting for the first of 5 Queens Tech Incubators. The first one very near and dear to my heart, and I know the borough presidents, and that's down the Rockaways. We want to get young startup companies, smart kids from Queens to have an opportunity for complimentary access to an incubator, stay for up to a year, and help them grow their business in Queens County. I think it's essential to get them. Listen, post-COVID, the chances of another HQ2, I think, are slim to none based upon the way things changed. I'd also argue that if we had chosen, or the people at Amazon had chosen Southeast Queens, we would not be having this conversation about them leaving. The folks in Southeast Queens would have embraced it and kept it. There's a lot of reasons for that, but it would have been a wonderful thing. But we're looking to make change in a very, very positive way, and it's all about tech.
Tom, on the tech incubators, if somebody is listening who wants to get involved, reach out to the chamber.
Yes, please. They can reach out to me directly, tgrech@queenschamber.org, go to our website. But the one in Rockaway is the first of 5 to get started. There's currently 2 and they're really good. One's at Queens College, one's at LaGuardia, but we're going to have one in the Rockaways, then at the Greater Nexus in Jamaica, followed by Flushing, Astoria, and then Long Island City. So we're very excited about that.
That's great. That's really great. And, you made an interesting point about regional planning. And when you look at the planning of New York City over centuries, so much of it was about people getting into Manhattan for work. And now that urban planners are really starting to think about, that not being the case, that you should be able to live, work, play in the other 4 boroughs. A lot of discussions about growing industries. What industries do the 2 of you sort of see as Queens really being the place for them to grow?
So I'll start with aviation and technology. Those are just easy. You look at what we've done at LaGuardia in terms of turning it from that third world airport to a state-of-the-art airport where we've invested about $8 billion with, working with the governor, of course. I'll be down, I think, touring Delta's terminal, I think tomorrow or Wednesday. But think about that, $8 billion going into the airport, and Queens-based small businesses got $850 million in contracts there. So you think about that, thousands of jobs created, thousands of solar panels on the roof, and then thousands of travelers coming into the borough every day. And then you fast forward, and I keep talking about aviation because there's so much investment happening there. We anticipate close to $15 billion being allocated into JFK Airport, where we just broke ground with the governor, Magic Johnson, Congressman Meeks. And we anticipate through that project, we're probably going to see close to $1 billion in contracts for locally based small businesses, of course, with stringent local hiring standards as well. So whether you're in food service, security, hospitality, there's going to be a place here in Queens for you. Some other industries I would keep an eye on, life sciences, certainly. I really see an opportunity to grow out life sciences in Long Island City. And I know we're working very closely with the partnership, and there's some good things happening there. But one of the things we want to see the city create is some sort of innovation zone up there, and maybe there's a way to incentivize businesses. For instance, the ventilators that were built at the height of the pandemic for hospitals, that was all built in Queens. A lot of people don't know that. You think about, we went and got our COVID tests. Where were the samples sent? They were sent to Long Island City. So there's a real opportunity to grow out there. Of course, construction, because I do anticipate we're going to see a lot more of the city's budget when it comes to affordable housing and building out housing. When I got here, we were about at 13% of the city's budget when it came to subsidizing housing. And this is something we've had a strong conversation with the Adams administration on. We want to see a lot more of that investment in places like Jamaica that are thriving. We all see what's happening in Long Island City, Astoria, and then the Rockaways as well. Lastly, I just want to end also because I know we've been working and we talk a lot about tech. And for those of you on this line, you should know we created a tech challenge, the Queens Tech Innovation Challenge, which we just launched with QEDC. And of course, the Queens Chamber has been a phenomenal partner in tech as well. So we are looking at spreading close to about a little bit over 100,000 in funding to about 5 winning Queens startups right now. And the emphasis in our tech challenge is breaking down those barriers in tech in underserved communities. So those are some key areas I think to look out for. I would say the life sciences, tech, aviation, healthcare is going to continue to grow as we look to expand out healthcare in the borough. And then I would also pay attention to our cultural institutions as well, which we're heavily investing in.
Tom, what are you thinking?
So
Sounds like a lot of good stuff.
It's wonderful. Our borough president isn't just the borough president of Queens. He's the leader of the 4th largest city in America. And I think that's a really, really important thing to note, that we're really in a really cool place right now within the great city of New York. There's 62 counties in New York State. I want to make sure that Queens County is the greenest of those counties. So working with the borough president and the mayor and folks at NYSERDA, as well as a number of Queens Chamber members, we're out to kind of drive and facilitate sustainability. Local law 97 came on board. Costa Cosentinides, the former city council member, championed that. Some people were angry about it. It's too much. But you know what? Sometimes my feeling is if you get lemons, you make lemonade, right? It's a good thing to do for our environment. It's a good thing to do for our kids. And between Con Ed, National Grid, NYSERDA, the funds are there to help people, and we want to help facilitate that. So in addition to all the things the borough president just mentioned, I think green and sustainability, we champion projects left and right that help us. For example, the Hydro-Quebec project, which is now going to bring really inexpensive electricity, hydropower from up north, our neighbors to the north in Quebec, right down to Astoria, and help keep our asthma rates in check amongst our people in Queens County and other parts. It's really, really important. They become great corporate partners. And I think it's really important that folks like in government, like our borough president, and those in business champion those companies and work closely to get support. And I'd be remiss, I know you're wearing your Met shirt, but I know Donovan will agree as well, how generous and wonderful our new owners are, Steve and Alex Cohen over at Citi Field. We talked a little bit about the signing they just did. There's a new spirit, there's a new invigoration, and the timing could not be better between the borough president, the resurgence of small business, the ownership of the Mets, and the revitalization of that area along Willets Point. It's very exciting times.
That's great. Do you have any cannabis seems to be a growing topic these days, and possible growing industry. Any thoughts on how Queens could, capitalize on some of those jobs and some of those business opportunities?
Absolutely. I went up to Albany last weekend for a New York State cannabis conference, and I learned a lot about the process and the program. And we're going to work to put together a Queens cannabis conference sometime in the first quarter of 2023. It's a great opportunity for businesses large and small. It's a great opportunity for those that have been in the system, so to speak, that are going to get a second chance to go out there and literally, I tongue in cheek, grow their own business. There's so much opportunity right here in New York State. And I think we've got all the tools that we need to make sure that we can have a successful launch and opportunity for our businesses in Queens County.
Yeah, and I'll add on that we created within my office, because most of you may remember or may not know that I chaired the Public Safety Committee of the City Council, which actually uncovered the disparities in marijuana summonses and arrests across our city, which primarily showed 86% of all arrests were in summonses were in communities of color. I had this running joke, which was real, like if you're white and you smoke marijuana, you go to Yale. If you're black and brown, you go to jail. Remember talking about that very clearly, in which catapulted obviously the conversation to legalization to the state as well. So we're really focused in this area. We're going to also be working with the chamber on some conferences as well, because we want to make sure, especially for those communities most impacted, that those opportunities are there. And one of the things we're telling folks is that you don't just have to focus in on the cannabis aspect. There's so many different aspects to this. Marketing, packaging, you could do a whole bevy of things without just focusing in on the cannabis. And so we're having a lot of discussion, and there's a lot of interest I found in many of the communities that have been impacted by the marijuana injustices we saw in the past. So there's a real opportunity to focus in, to scale up. And one of the places I studied, and I'm not sure if they totally got it right, was what they did in Oakland. Certainly making sure that access to capital is key here. So if you are a big corporation that's coming in here, like still ensuring that there's access to capital to grow out MBE peers and startups for some of the individuals who are most impacted, especially in Southeast Queens, which was the #1 community in New York City, the 105th that led the city in summonses and arrests. So there's a real opportunity here to get this right. We'll be working with everybody, focusing on that.
That's great to hear. That's really great to hear. So if I could, let's look 10 years into the future. And I could wave my magic wand. What would you want? What do you want to see in the borough? What does the borough look like in 10, 15, 20 years?
I think, we talked about diversity. I think you're going to continue to see more growth in Queens than perhaps any other boroughs. I could see, one of the things, connectivity, I would say, is something that we've been largely focused on. How do you get around the borough? I know we'll probably hop into the Interborough Express and some other things, but I think there's a real key opportunity to just make Queens that live, work, and play space we talked about a little bit earlier, right? Why should we have to leave our borough? You know, you should be able to go to your local coffee shop. And you also largely look at the patterns around employment, right? Although everybody's saying, go back to the office, go back to the office. You know, I don't see people returning to I know some people may not like it, but nobody's going back to 5 days. You know, people are gonna work 3 days and then 2 days from home. So how do we create those business incubator opportunities? I can see our entrepreneurial spirit continuing to grow here, but really you won't really have to leave this place. You know, a quick joke is like I have to travel, and I have a 6-year-old, to Long Island or Manhattan or Brooklyn to go to a children's museum. We're going to build a children's museum at the Queens Museum, right? So you won't really have to leave this borough, for those of you who got children, any longer to find the things that you need, from the cultural institutions, from transportation investments, even if you like soccer, the redevelopment of Willard's Point, which I think we're gonna have some announcements on, with the football club there, New York Football Club. There's so much keen opportunity.
Fully 100% endorse any soccer stadium.
You won't have to leave this borough for anything.
Absolutely.
And what I'll also say is,
Flushing Meadow's a home of soccer.
we also are becoming a music hub, right? So like I had Live Nation in last week. I mean, people want to be here. They want to promote culture. They want to promote, they love our diversity. And I think also looking at the music industry moving into the future, there's a lot of interest to really do some large scale festivals here. So there's a real opportunity, I think, to continue to rebrand Queens as the most hippest and upcoming borough in our city.
Absolutely.
I think we're going to see places like Jamaica, for example, become more of a destination than ever before. Again, I'm very, very bullish in that area down there. Our friend and our board member, Meredith Marshall from BRP Properties, is building thousands and thousands of units in and around the Jamaica train station. I'm also on the board of York College. That's an up and coming institution. I think in 10 years, you're going to see that as a real live, work, play area with a quick jump on the train to go to JFK, down to the casino at Resorts World, and then points east and west. You know, going through Jamaica, even 5 years ago, you kind of ducked your head going through with the squidgy on the windows, and it wasn't really a pleasurable experience. I think you're going to see that be a wonderful thing. And then I'd pivot up to Northern Queens, what we talked about with the whole area. Again, to me, the catalyst and the person that deserves lots of the credit so far with some smart development there is the owners of the Mets, Steve and Alex Cohen. Well, they're not going to control everything. They're going to be a great impetus for at least something that I've been wishing for and hoping for. 15 years ago, way before my time, the forefathers of the chamber did a really cool study about the need for a convention center in Queens. I can't tell you how many phone calls I get, mostly before the COVID. Tom, where's the convention center in Queens? And I got to say, we don't have one. And then I talked to Alan Steele, who runs the Javits, and he goes, Tom, I get the same questions, only we're too big. So I think somewhere in Queens, whether it's down by Resorts World, whether it's at the Willard's Point vicinity, something that's smaller size, nimble, that can allow people to fly to LaGuardia, come over to the area by Willard's Point, or alternatively, you fly in the JFK and you go to a convention center down there, or the LIRR or the Amtrak, et cetera, et cetera. We're in a great, great spot to make the area number one around Willard's Point kind of become, listen, over those 2 weeks during the tennis, Danny Zau's is on our board. 776,000 people went to the USTA. That should be more of a year-round destination between soccer, the Mets, tennis, the wonderful museums down over there. You name it, that place ought to be Mecca for tourism and travel and destinations. And I think we've got all the right pieces in place between the borough president, Greg Meeks, the speaker, Adrian Adams. I mean, we've got all the things lined up. We just now have to execute. And that's where I think the partnership between government and business, there's no time to dither. And the last thing I'll say about that is the rest of the world and the rest of our country is not waiting for Queens and New York to get our act together. We have to be decisive. We have to attract the right capital quality, and we must embrace our minority women-owned businesses so they can all eat at the same table.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the other interesting component of the convention connection is the 7 train. So Javits and Willits are connected perfectly by the 7 train, and you could
Absolutely.
align. We do some work for Javits, that's why I know a lot about this. But you could align everything going on from a. So I actually want to. Can we spend a second on Flushing Meadow Park, because, as I said earlier, to me, that is the heartbeat of New York City in the country, right? I mean, when people come here from all over the world or wherever I talk to, I would say if you really want to understand New York City, go to Flushing Meadow Park on a weekend. That's what New York City is about. Is there an opportunity to really think? I mean, I know we're talking Willits, et cetera, but do you think that there's an opportunity to really think big about Flushing Meadow and do something special? Because it drives me insane hearing, I mean, this is Queensway, but like drives me insane hearing about all this money going to love Manhattan, love Brooklyn, a huge amount of parks money, but like Flushing Meadow is extraordinary.
Hell yeah, there's an opportunity there. And I'm telling you, everybody's knocking on our door about this
Good.
park. I mean, when I talk about apparently, and I didn't know this, and I do have a music business background as well, studying music management for some time. But everybody sees this as one of the best, many people in the industry, it's one of the best festival sites you can have perhaps in the world, which is unbelievable. I mean, sitting in the seat and having many people knock on our door to say, we want to really maximize opportunity at this park. And we've been working very closely with the Adams administration, because along with that, of course, we want to ensure the quality of life as Queens is upkept. And I know that it's a residential area as well around the park, but I think there's a real key opportunity to grow out opportunities that will benefit those small businesses, MBEs, really growing that park to do what it was intended to do, to be our central park of Queens. And it is central for everyone. So I think, we have to think about transportation, of course. How do we move people there? But I think from a music standpoint, I think you're going to hear some good news coming into the future. Once again, working with the Adams administration and Parks Department to really grow out those opportunities, to make Queens also the center of cultural music as well, right? So I think there's a real key opportunity. And with that comes investments. I mean, we're looking at the pavilion, for instance. I just put, I think, 12 million into it. Parks Department comes back for another 20 every 2 months. But they're doing some work on the first tower. We anticipate the second tower we're going to finish with this administration. And I think about the World's Fair, like how do we return it back to its glory? So I think that those are key opportunities. Working with the federal government, state and city, we have an opportunity to really maximize in the park.
The really nice part about that park is we can do it in a lot of different ways. I'm encouraged by the borough president's comments, but when I go to the Met game, if I take the train, I go from Bayside on the LIRR right over to Mets Willits Point, which is nice. But when I drive, I leave the parking lot. I take that ring road that goes right by the towers, and it follows the path and comes out the other end by the Willits Point by the Bullet Points Boulevard over there. And when I drive through and I see the virtual UN of people barbecuing, roasting, whatever they're doing, they got their families here, they got these little pop-up tents. And I will give some props and encouragement to the Parks Department that as of late, especially this last summer, there's not trash everywhere. There's 20 or 30 garbage cans filled up, but there's not 5 garbage cans overflowing. So kudos and a shout out to Parks for understanding how important that is for lots of different reasons. But that area could be our Central Park. I think Donovan just said that. It's a great opportunity to allow the big concerts to draw in some well-deserved funding for that area, as well as for the local folks to go there with their kids and kick around a soccer ball and dream about soccer and sports and so on, just like a half a mile away from there. It really is a great opportunity. All my comments are always based upon not only the business aspect of it, but the cultural. People want to relocate their business here. It's not just about the 4 walls in an office, be it at home or in Queens. They want their people to be able to come to relocate to Queens, grow their businesses, and enjoy that live, work, play opportunity. And I think we're on our way.
It's interesting the comment about virtual UN too, because the original UN is the Queens Museum, right in Flushing Meadow Park, and the state of Israel was created right there. I mean, it's amazing history. So it's it's incredibly exciting to see the vision and the thinking around what could go there. We talked about Flushing Meadow Park. What other projects are out there? Donovan, you mentioned Interborough Express. What's some of the other projects that are out there that are coming that you think are exciting, really going to uplift
Yeah.
Queens?
So I think I do want to stay on Interborough for a minute and of course applaud the governor for really investing in this project because it does have the opportunity to ensure that we're bringing passenger rail to a freight line that runs between Jackson Heights and Bay Ridge, and it could definitely be a way to attract hundreds of thousands of people, both between Brooklyn and Queens, and that means jobs as well. And think about that for a minute. We're talking about a 40-minute ride from end to end. So there's a real key opportunity there. Of course, I talked about Willets Point. I know Steve Cohen has some plans baking. I mean, we'll see what happens with this casino stuff, but I know even for his site, he feels that it's, underutilized, and there's a real key opportunity, I think, to make that a live, work, and play space as well, including bringing the ferry down to LaGuardia. Something I've talked a lot about, and people thought like I was out of my mind when I said this, but EDC actually did have a study very early on in the 2000s where they thought it was possible, and making sure that we can also have some connectivity to the Bronx through that ferry service as well, as I think is a key opportunity. I talked about Terminal 1, I talked about Terminal 5, and Tom hit definitely on Jamaica. And Jamaica really, we have such a key opportunity, being that, well, you get off the air train, you're heading right into Jamaica. It's a key, we have a key opportunity to really invest in Jamaica, and we're working with the governor's staff on something called Queens Forward, which is going to be an initiative that we announced, of course, with dollars attached to it, where we're focusing in on some key economic development opportunities, as well as investments in transportation and healthcare and housing, all of those key things, education. And then the last side I want to talk about is Creedmoor. Creedmoor has over 100 acres of land that has largely been underutilized, underdeveloped, and there has not been, every borough president has took a crack at this thing, and it's sort of stayed where it's at, dormant. And I'm happy to say we are working very closely with ESD, working very closely with our local elected officials in the community, of course, who we're going to want to have a lot of input from to really create a live, work, play space there. I don't think any of us take lightly when we leave our homes, seeing people who are homeless, seeing people who need supportive housing. And I think that this site can really be a game changer in terms of investing in human capital, but also ensuring that we can do the wraparound services, economic development on the site, grow small businesses, community facilities. So I think that that's a site everybody should keep their eyes on as well as we head into the first quarter next year.
Travis, I want to dovetail, if I can, on the borough president's comments about the ferry. I too am a big proponent of the ferry. We celebrated or remembered, maybe more importantly, the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Sandy a week or so ago, and I was with the borough president, graced us with his presence. It was remarkable. And so we sat on the roof of the Rockaway Hotel, which is the testament to the resiliency. He and I looked out towards the Manhattan skyline, and it was funny because a lot of the 75 guests or so that were there took the ferry from Wall Street. They came from Wall Street, they took the ferry, which is a stone's throw from the hotel, and were just remarking about how easy it was and how beautiful it was. Now, granted, it was a beautiful night. And I'd also suggest over by the Willets Point area that we could do both. There ought to be a ferry connection. I'm not sure how many folks from the Bronx want to come down and see the Mets, but as we continue to do better, maybe we'll convert some of them to become Mets fans.
What do you think?
Oh, I know it. They don't want to admit it. They don't want to admit it, Donovan. But also, the rail connection to me, I don't make any bones about it. I'm one of the co-chairs for what used to be called the LaGuardia Air Train, but what I now call, in deference to the current environment, the Willets Point LaGuardia connector, right? There ought to be a rail link that gets travelers with some sense of consistency from Manhattan to the airport, to connect over to Willets Point. It opens up the entire Willets Point area. You still can't get people from the airport over there without a rail link. I just think it's a wonderful opportunity, frankly, to have both. Why not? Especially when the rail line would be paid for by user fees, not by tax dollars. But I don't want to get too much into that except to say, boy, there's no other place in the 5 boroughs in the biggest city in the planet talking about this kind of expansion like the 3 of us are right now. It really is exciting, I got to tell you, and very much looking forward to the future.
Well, as you guys are talking about, regional rail hubs are where you really want to have commercial density. So you look at what's going on Penn Station, Grand Central. I want to get into this in a minute. Too is one of the larger regional infrastructure projects going on that impact Queens. But to have one in, you have one in Jamaica already. You could have one in Willets Point would be fascinating. And to your point, Borough President, about living, working, and playing. You can imagine going to work in Willets Point, being able to use the park and all the great food around it, and that's the experience. I mean, I help run a business, like that's the stuff that helps attract talent.
Yep. I don't have to worry about other people's money, but one of the comments I've made to the developers on the Flushing side, downtown Flushing side, as well as others, is wouldn't it be nice to have a pedestrian bridge built across the Flushing Creek, connecting downtown Flushing with the whole Willets Point area? We've got Roosevelt Avenue on the one side, we've got the Whitestone Expressway all the way on the other. But how about opening up that whole area to the pedestrians of downtown Flushing to get access there? There's just so much available. It's really kind of incredible.
And I'll add on the controversial air train project as well. There were some proposals, and yes, it'll take a lot of money and political will, and maybe it's real and maybe it's not. But even how do we connect the Jamaica air train to LaGuardia? I mean, is there a way to connect that, right? And I know people have talked about building a bridge over, I believe, the Grand Central, and that may be a bridge too far. But the point is those are things that we should explore. How do we once again get from point A to B to C to D and E in Queens, which is good for jobs and good for building out our borough, because we know the outer boroughs are going to be cities amongst themselves. That's where we're headed. I don't want to say Manhattan's a thing of the past, but I will say Queens is the future, right? So I think that there are some things we have to be creative about, knowing that the economy is changing, the way people work is changing, and I anticipate, looking at, like my son woke up the other day, he's like, Dad, I want to get into coding. I want to be a hacker. I don't know where he got the hacker thing from, but the point is like these kids are into tech. They're not going into the office every day anymore, right? No. I have to imagine when he's 17, 18, 19, it's just a different work environment. So I think we do have to reimagine the way we get around. And quite frankly, just in closing on this point, is like I always joke, it's easier to get to Florida by plane than it is to get to Manhattan by bus and train, right? And it shouldn't be, right? And if it's hard to get to Manhattan that way, imagine for certain parts of Queens is just as hard to get to as well without getting on 2 buses and a train. So we want to make sure that connectivity is a key strategy moving forward.
Yeah, that's so important. We're getting some questions in the chat, and I know we're at that time, and there's some questions around renovation of the pavilion. There was a comment about the accessibility of the Willets Point train stations, which I hope they're accessible. That's super important. But I don't want to leave today without talking about a really important part of economic development, which is workforce development. And I love that the mayor, actually, the deputy mayor for economic and workforce, is deputy mayor for economic workforce development. The two of you, I think, have done some incredible things around not just the attraction of commercial activity, but making sure that like the JetBlue announcement, right? Making sure that the people living here have, for lack of a better term, sort of first right to the jobs that are being created, and the vendors that would be working on whatever, that there are connections made with the vendors in Queens with these projects. I was wondering if you could just comment on that a little bit.
Well, I'll just say, yeah, and I've been, everybody knows the conversation they're going to have with me when they come in here, whether it's residential development, whether it's commercial development, whether it's the airport. I work very closely with Congressman Meeks on the JFK airport lease with the city. we're going to continue to beat the drum on making sure that the city is investing in workforce in the state. And, we have to use our colleges. CUNY, we really have a real opportunity working with CUNY. So I think about York College and their economic and workforce development for startups, right? They have a business center there. Queens College has a school of business. I think about how healthcare is going to grow. I was at a groundbreaking at St. John's University, and they're doing a school just focused in on healthcare, right? So I think we have to make sure we're meeting people where they're at. Business incubators. I know Tom has worked very closely with Greater Jamaica Development Corporation on, I believe, the Nexus, Jamaica Nexus, I think it's called. So those are things that we have to grow. And we have to remember that a lot of folks, we're growing out entrepreneurship here in the borough. So really creating those hubs where people don't have to travel to Manhattan like we used to in the past, where they can travel to downtown Jamaica to use the Nexus to grow out their small businesses is going to be, I think, key moving into the future as well. But I think tapping into that, our strength is definitely our universities and community colleges. How are we partnering with them? And then I'll end in just saying the Department of Small Business Services, we work extremely closely with, and very happy the new commissioners from Queens. So really working with them to build out also small business hubs across the borough as well as strengthening our local organizations like a Queens Chamber, like a Greater Jamaica, like an LIC partnership, because you should really, what I envision is really having these hubs in every corner of the borough, especially in places where unemployment is high, right? So we talk about driving down crime numbers once again. You have to meet people where they're at. How are we filtering information into these communities? How are we training them? Tom touched on the Mets earlier. Alexandria Cohen is a big supporter. She's going to be focusing in on workforce development and sort of building out these incubators. That's something vocational school, something she's very passionate about. So it's how do we really connect the public and private partnerships to really grow out the workforce and train and get them ready for the jobs of tomorrow.
The first part of workforce in the statement of workforce development obviously is work, but I think it's more about careers than anything else, because work can be perceived as work, right? The joke is, well, why do they call it work? Because it's hard, it's work, right? But careers are more important because, Donovan mentioned his son D3 wanting to be a hacker or a coder, but you know what? There's a couple kernels of truth in there. A young person like that learns at a very, very early age some of the technology, and there's no reason why our vicinity, our area, could not rival some of the hotspot tech places in our country and in our world. And once you get the tech pebble in the pond and that ripple effect, then it becomes restaurants. Then it becomes, other places, service providers, accounting firms, legal firms, all those different things sprout. And that's why we're so excited about partnering with the Borough President's Office on tech in general, but we're also raising a $40 million Queens Angel Fund. I want to go out to those that have made it in Queens and outside of Queens, but have roots in Queens. I'm talking about people like Ron Artest, who's out there, right? Some of the folks from the sports world, the entertainment world.
I played against him in basketball when I was in high school. He killed
Yeah,
me.
I mean, St. John's guy, right? We want to go to him and say, can you spare a couple of $1 million to invest in the community, right? To help out these Queens-based startups once they start growing and prospering and shed homegrown capital. We're very, very excited about that.
Yep. Really great points. I want to spend a second on a variety of different sort of regional proposals going on and kind of get your take on this. There's been a lot talked about East Side Access, the expansion of, or the renovation of Penn Station, congestion pricing obviously being a big one, gateway projects. What do those mean for our borough? What are your take on those?
Transportation is the great equalizer, right? And that has been our struggle here, right? How do we get around? So I am supportive of all of those. As somebody who used to travel into City Hall by the LIW, I would get into Penn Station and say, this place, I mean, I would probably miss my train. I missed my train once or twice because it's just so horrible to keep up with anything happening in there. But I think there's a real key opportunity to make sure that we're building first-class transportation hubs for the region, right? And this has a regional, some people look at it, oh, it's just Manhattan, but Penn Station has such an impact on Queens, Long Island, and beyond. So but one of the things I want to also say is, even as we talk about Penn, is ensuring that there's more access, right, to our commuter rails right here in Queens, right? So I think that there are some key opportunities. We did the Atlantic ticket, for instance, out of Southeast Queens. And I mean, before I would be able to get a seat in that on the LIRR when I was traveling to City Hall. Once we did the Atlantic ticket, you forget about it. So I want to see the Atlantic ticket, for instance, expanded into Penn Station, right? Because a lot of our people work in Midtown as well. So, there has to be some strategies afoot, even as we invest on congestion pricing. I'm supportive of congestion pricing. I think there are things that need to be modified in the proposal. I think $9 is a bit much for Queens. I think $23 is a bit much for Queens. I think that our livery, our yellow cabs need to be exempted. So there are things that need to happen within that proposal to get me 100% there. But in terms of concept, because we do need to have money in the MTA to invest in many of the things we're talking about. We're talking about Interborough. We're talking about the possibility of Queensway and Queens Link. We're talking about improving bus service, a bus rapid transit. None of that is going to be paid for without congestion pricing and federal investment. And I could tell you, going into Q1, it's a projection that we may see, I don't want to use the word, a recession, the R word, right? And it may not be as bad as 2008, but that means I anticipate less federal dollars coming into the city. How do we raise these dollars to do all the things we're talking about? Whether it's ferry at LaGuardia, whether it's the air train, all of these things, we need to figure out how to pay for them. Nothing is free. So in concept supportive, but I think all of these things are good. Any investments in transportation are good, and not to mention the jobs.
I'm happy to hear you say about congestion pricing. It's a hot topic, but I talk to people where I live in Forest Hills about this all the time, and there's a lot of different sides. But if you're a transit rider, a public transit rider, this is more money that's going to help improve that system. And if you're a driver, I don't know why you drive in Manhattan, but that's all. But you hopefully can clear out and make it a smoother drive into Manhattan. So it's a win-win-win for everybody. I know that there's a cost to it, but the outcomes are very good. Tom, I don't know if you want to share your sort of thinking around just general regional infrastructure projects.
Yeah, two comments. One is about Sunnyside Yards, and the other one is congestion pricing in general. I do understand the concept of it. What I'm concerned about is, the borough president mentioned $9 to $23 for a car. It's as high as 82 for a truck, right? So I have two comments about that. Number one, and we hosted Jano Lieber, the president and CEO of the MTA, a few weeks ago to a large crowd at the chamber members. Number one is e pluribus unum, again, right? We're all in this together. I'm not a big believer in exemptions. It doesn't really matter what your background might be as far as your profession, but I think if everybody paid, we could pay a lot less collectively, right? And the other part about that is fare evasion. I hear it all the time from my members about the Wall Streeters down in the Wall Street station. One guy holds open the gate and 20 run through. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. We're all in this together. We got to find a way to make it all work for all of us so we can make the improvements that we desperately need. And the other thing is, I think we kind of had a hiccup or a burp somewhere along the way with the Sunnyside Yards. There was supposed to have been, with the West Side Access, a train station built at Sunnyside, an LIRR station. I know that was brought to their attention. I think we've got their attention, but Sunnyside Yards could be another huge opportunity. It's 160 something acres that right now is kind of, I'm not gonna say it's sidelined. I know our friends at EDC have a lot on their plate, but they're so capably led by Andrew Kimball. I think it's one of those things, talk about density and space and so on. It's a great thing to be thinking about. It won't happen for 25 or 30 years in its entirety, but it's something that we should be talking about in the same way we're talking about Willets Point and other developments down by the airport and at JFK and at in downtown Jamaica.
I'm agree. I'm in alignment with Tom on Sunnyside. It's really an opportunity there, of course, in anything we talk about when it comes to development, making sure that the community outreach is done properly. And it is something, it's one of those key areas that we have an opportunity to really invest in, to build out transportation, housing, multi mixed use development. You know, it's a real key opportunity there.
Other thing I'm going to mention too, and I don't want to get ahead of my skis here, is the whole notion of innovation Q&S. I know that the borough president and I are in lockstep about that. 1,100 units being built, hopefully being built down there. We think it's a wonderful thing for the entire county and for the city. And the numbers suggest that the lack of affordable, truly deep affordable housing there, we're missing the boat if we don't approve that thing, because so many small mom and pop businesses can't pay their people a ton of money. And the lowest number I've seen so far for a studio, and the borough president can correct me, I think it was like $514 a month for a studio at the lowest level. You don't pay that for a studio in Cleveland, for heaven's sake, right? And that's right here. That's right here in the great borough of Queens. So I don't want to belabor the point, but I think folks are coalescing around the importance of that development. They did it at Howard's Point. I gave a tip of the hat to Tiffany Caban for what she did over there and other places. We need that project desperately.
I know we're running low on time because this could go on. We could probably go on forever and ever on these conversations. I have two last questions. One that just keeps coming up in the Q&A is affordability, especially housing affordability. Thoughts on that? I know, Borough President, you're very...
This is one, you know, on affordability, you know, one of the things I've spoken to the Adams administration and Tom alluded to this, you know, looking at Innovation Queens. You look at how historically the city has not put a lot of subsidy into many parts of Western Queens, right? So the mere fact that I got the Adams administration ready to put 15% in or more of subsidy into Innovation Queens is historic in nature in itself. You're talking about almost 600 units at 30% AMI. It's a game changer. And it's a policy change because we know historically, where do they put subsidy? In places like Far Rockaway. And I understand the mechanics of $40 a square foot to build was $40 a square foot to build in Far Rockaway when I did the Far Rockaway rezoning. But we have 10,000 units anticipated coming online out in the Rockaways, out in Far Rockaway, and that's largely been subsidized. So you look at where the New York Housing Conference has put out their report. Where has affordable housing been built in Queens? Really been the same neighborhood, Jamaica, Far Rockaway. We need to see more diversity of investments in subsidized happening around the borough. And then we also have to continue to push back against NIMBYs. And that is just the bottom line. You know, I'm all for community participation, but every part of our borough needs to open its arms to building affordable housing. I'm very proud of what I'm seeing in Forest Hills, you know, where we get projects, people push for that option one here, and then, you know, we may not get subsidy in all the projects, but the point is the community board has really said we need to be a part of this conversation to ensure that we're building out more affordable housing. So this is a question of priorities, and trust me, we're pushing the administration to continue to change that policy. I had the mayor out walking the site. I think, Tom, you were with us last week, you know,
yes,
saying we need to see more investments from City Hall into the affordable housing budget in Queens and not just in Far Rockaway.
Great, that's great. We have another minute or so. Final question, favorite places to eat?
In Queens? Everywhere.
In Queens.
I mean, Jesus, that's a loaded question.
It's one of the questions I was put in the Q&A, so I thought it was.
I'm always looking for good places.
I was at Aigner Chocolate on Metropolitan Avenue this morning. So
the chocolate is so good. Oh,
Borough President, if I may, there's a place that just got a Michelin star, Zob Zob. It's a Thai food place that we highlighted in our restaurant issue. You can't go wrong with New Park Pizza down on Cross Bay Boulevard. I will tell you the
best pizza I've ever had.
Hotel. Oh my God, it's fantastic. You know, Zoom Stammtisch for some ethnic stuff. You know, we worked a lot with Mama's Empanadas during this during the COVID. They got some grants through the Steve Cohen generosity. The borough president has helped us identify a lot of those places, but it really is tough to just select even a dozen because there's so many good places. Listen, during the COVID, there's 6,000 restaurants in Queens County. We lost 1,000. I would argue that since then, more have sprouted. We probably have more than 1,000. They've come back roaring, and it's a great news story about the resiliency of our businesses and testament to my weight gain.
And I want to add something because I know it gets controversial when you speak about street vendors, but Corona Plaza, I mean,
Yeah.
you go there, you can get, I mean, just a taste of the world there, as well. So I just
Absolutely.
wanted to also highlight, some of those street vendors. And subsequently, you talked about the Steve and Andrea Cohen grant we created, which most of you may not know. We were able to get about $18 million from the Mets. Ask the Yankees how much they put up, but that's another story for another day for the Bronx.
That's why I'm wearing this.
But the Mets put up $18 million at the height of the pandemic, and we were able to distribute close to $16 million working with Queens Chamber and some other CBOs as well. 799 businesses were able to tap into close to $20,000 in grants, no loans. And we saw, and one of the things we did is we also did a pilot. Since it was private money, we were able to also support some of those street vendors. And we saw some of those street vendors who got fired at the height of the pandemic turn into street vendors. They worked in a local restaurant, they got fired, so they went out and became street vendors, were able to tap into some of that grant money as well, and then go open their own restaurants, right? So we want to continue to harness and support that as well, as we move into the future as well, to really give, especially our immigrant communities, an opportunity at the American dream. And that's what makes Queens what it is. As we talk about diversity, I was in Diversity Plaza last night. I don't even know the name of the place. I just go there and I grab everything I can when I'm up there. But you can really get a taste of the world in Queens. Go out and eat, support these small businesses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mr. Borough President Tom, you guys are the best. I gotta tell you, it's so reassuring to have the two of you overseeing the future of this borough. It's another reminder why it's just such a wonderful privilege to raise a family here. The experiences, cultural diversity, the businesses, passion, the parks, all cultural institutions. It's like best place in the world. It really, really is. And I credit the two of you for working 24 hours a day to just make my family and so many family and business owners' quality of life just a little bit better. And that means the world. So to all of us. So I wish you all continued luck. I want you to know the Capalino family is always here to help you in whatever you're trying to achieve. I'm certainly a phone call away. I think, Barbara, you mentioned that when we had our
Travis, thank you so much to you and the Capalino folks. And the tip of the hat, as always, the Borough President Richards.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure to walk in lockstep with you on 99.9% of the issues. You're a wonderful leader, and we appreciate your guidance and leadership in Queens.
And I didn't pay him to say that, by the way, but I do want to thank Capalino. Travis, I want to thank you because it really is, it's refreshing when you come in and, certainly folks like Tanisha understand where I'm coming from, being born and raised in Southeast Queens, and really trying to make sure that these opportunities that open up for everyone. So it really is refreshing when you bring your clients in, that yes, the question that we're going to ask. And even if you don't have all the answers, you make a concerted effort to ensure that you get back to us, and we work in tandem to better the lives of folks across the city in Queens. And of course, Tom, you've been a great partner, even when we may have disagreements on certain things, but that's a part of life. My wife
Absolutely.
and I don't agree on everything as well, but I understand that the Chamber's passion comes from its leadership, and the way you've diversified the ranks at the Chamber as well has been historic and refreshing as well. And, we look forward to continuing to work with you to really continue to make sure that Queens is that work, live, and play space that everybody wants to be in. So I want to thank you for your partnership as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. And I know there was at our peak, about 130 people listening to this webinar. I know a number of people probably downloaded afterwards. So hopefully we gave them a real sense of future and encourage everybody to reach out, all of us, so we can be helpful in making you successful in the borough. And Mr. Borough President Tom, you're the best. It's always good to be in a collection of presidents. And we'll speak soon. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Take care.